everyone, it's Maureen. I hadn't posted a video in a while, and I figured this was a good opportunity to discuss vintage sewing. It's sort of fairly popular here on YouTube. It's one of those situations where sometimes with sewing, it's hard to get a good start, figure out what you need, what works, what doesn't. And I wanted to kind of talk about some sewing tools and also some things that help you as you get along. I've been in a group called the Society for Creative Anachronism for about 15 years now, and I specialize in making dolls, historical clothing, and embroidery. And one of the things that I noticed is that I really didn't have a formal education on it. I kind of had to learn as I go. And so I wanted to share a little bit of knowledge with you folks out there on YouTube. So around me, which is off camera, I have several different sort of sewing implements and things to show you what I use and what I've kind of learned as I've gone along. I have my medieval sewing kit right next to me here. And I mainly keep everything in kind of little boxes like this. This is embroidery I have done myself. I really liked crewel embroidery, which is very, very late 16th century into 17th century. And I kind of keep a book of needles. You're going to be using needles of all sizes and different types. So I have different selections for different uses. Like there are such things as darning needles, embroidery needles. Some of the bigger ones are more useful for something that requires a thicker thread. And because I do a lot of clothing sewing, hooks and eyes. See, there we go. You guys can kind of see. I happen to locally have a really awesome antique shop. And there is a lady there who sells antique sewing items. So I kind of have it a little bit easy. But you can get hooks and eyes at Joann's or just about any other place. And they come in various different sizes. So I have a couple sets of those because that's how I close a lot of my medieval clothing specifically, because they didn't really use buttons. That was mainly on men's clothing. And then a cake of beeswax. You can get these in different sizes. This is maybe about a pound, and use it to condition your thread, because as you're using your metal needle, because that's what they have right now anyway, as you're using your needle and going in and out of your thread, having it waxed helps give it strength and prevents it from shredding, with all the friction that's created with sewing. And one of the things I really wanted to kind of talk about today is tapes, all the different kinds. I know you're probably thinking, wow, she's really excited about tapes. What's up with this? One of the situations that I've noticed is that I can do a lot more with this. There's a couple different kinds. This is called bias tape. Now, with it being black, and I have some white over here too, it's kind of hard to see, but they're cut on the bias. It's a 45-degree angle is how the tape is cut. And that provides just a tiny bit of stretch. And that actually is used, at least I've noticed it, bias tape is used on those seams that take stress. Things that you're going to be using on the inside of your garments themselves that'll take stress. And you can get bias tape in just about any color. You can, match the inside of your lining if you choose. You could match the outside color of the garment if it's running along the edge. Like a collar is a good time to use a little bit of tape, because that can help keep your edges nice and crisp. If it's wool, maybe that'll keep it off your skin if you're a little bit allergic, or it's a spot that it's going to rub. That would be uncomfortable, depending on your wool, of course. So tapes are really great to help out with different uses. One of the other ones that I've run into that I like to use I know it's black again, and I also have it in white. This is called twill tape. Now twill tape, because of the way that it's woven, does also have a little bit of stretch. But it's woven, and I hope I can get the camera to focus it here. There's basically a V-like pattern on it. A twill weave creates a diagonal as well, but it's woven that way, not cut. So with that, and this has a nice little vintage label. I think it was 25 cents. 12 yards. Woohoo. It says super fine, mer-sized twill. But with this, we have basically the edges are facing away, and in the middle is just the diagonal. And with twill tape, it's very sturdy because of the way that it's woven. It works great for drawstrings. You wanted a apron. I'm looking for my pin. My pin disappeared. Oh, there it is. I don't know if I can get it. There we go, got it. With the way that this is woven, what helps give it a lot of strength, it works great for, I'd say, like apron ties. But you could also use it very much like binding tape in the same way, areas that take a lot of stress. And I know that there's some folks who use cording for different things, which would be like drawstrings for clothing and things like that. That can be a braided kind of situation. Either loose woven, which creates a square looking cord, or it can be finger loop braided, which is a form of braid, and those create really strong strings that you can use for ties for your clothing, because in medieval times they didn't have zippers, which is good because they're the devil. If you ever had to sew a zipper into modern clothing, you'll know what I mean. And one of the things that I had found out about most recently, besides twill tape and bias tape, which I think are awesome, and I've really gotten to appreciate what they do and the wonderful finishing effects that they give my clothing that I make. Let's see, I don't know if I have any other pins here to close these off. I don't think so. But here we go. English super fine 8 yards twill tape. Another very nice vintage label. You run into some of these, and I've noticed that vintage sewing items are coming into more popularity. But what I love about it is it's something that I'm actually going to use, and it's not just something decorative. One of the other kinds of tapes, found a pin, that I've learned to enjoy, and I just found out about it. It's called linen tape. It's just a straight weave tape. So we're talking nothing overly fancy. It's 100% linen. So here we go. Irish linen tape, warranted 4 yards, 3/4 inch. Nice little fancy label there too. And this one's pretty cool. Put one of my tiny little needles in here instead. Of course, a needle's not going to work quite as nice as a pin, but considering I can't find, I can use one of these. I found my pins. I know I had a nice little flat-headed one in here that I ran across the other day and was like, gee, how did you get in here? Speaking of sewing tools, now you guys are going to have a difficult time seeing it. Oh, there's that pin that I wanted. There we go. So linen tape. Yet again, you could use it very similarly. It could be used as a drawstring, but because of the weave, it may not be able to take as much tugging over time. But for those times that you need something, this will do. This was a gift that I was given because you just don't have the nifty vintage sewing tools around. Just trying to get the pins off of it so you can read it. There we go. Mills, oh here we go, Merchant and Mills pin magnet. Now it's gonna kind of come up backwards, but what it basically is there's a bit of cardboard written on either side, and there's a big magnet in the middle that kind of has a loop. It's like a big, it's actually fairly heavy, but basically you have all of your wonderful pins. I mean, sometimes they'll have straight ends on them. Like the most traditional ones I run into are what you call your flat-headed pin. I mean, nothing over the top or crazy fancy flat-headed pin. And I use these a lot because women's clothing, other than hook and eyes, drawstrings, sometimes you use pins to pin your clothes together. But normally that's for accessories. If you want something to stay put, maybe it isn't laying flat like it's supposed to. Just pin it to your underclothing and it'll lay flat. So there is such a thing in Tudor times called pin money, which basically was certain allotments, because these could easily work your way out of your clothes, even if you got them in there pretty well. So you may lose some pins throughout the day. So you'd have to replace those so you can dress yourself later on. So there's going to be a certain amount of money you're going to allot for pins. And I believe they found that kind of money in inventories and household accounts, things like that from the Tudor time frame. But anyway, pin magnet, awesome. Because it does stuff like that. Keeps everything together. I really have this sort of in there by itself, and I can just grab a pin as I need it. Works out great that way. One of the other things you run into is vintage sewing thread. Now this is something I would caution folks against. Reason I say is new fabrics and new threads, they're new, they have a certain amount of strength to them. Just like vintage clothing, original vintage clothing from its respective time period, as time goes on, the fabric weakens, it ages, just kind of like we do, unfortunately. So things start to break down. And so when you run into vintage sewing thread, embroidery thread, wool thread made out of different materials, I caution anybody on using it for something that's strength bearing. Test it out every time before you're gonna buy it, or test it when you get home. It's gonna be very affordable. You might be able to get a whole entire bag of it. That's how I got my first collections. But I also learned the hard lesson when I started having some items of clothing when I used vintage threads and it fell apart, and I had to re-sew things back together or repair it fairly often because the original thread was just not strong enough. So do be careful. Now, this has an old Coates and Clark, a wood spool. These are really popular. Even if, let's say, you're not sewing, some people love just the accoutrement, the look of it. This is a really heavy, almost canvas-like kind of cotton, like you would use on, let's say, sewing a button on a coat, something that's going to take a lot of stress. This is super, super thick. And this is good thread. I've used it pretty much, as you can tell. And it's not falling apart at all. But if you do buy vintage threads, vintage embroidery threads, sewing threads, find a way of testing them first to make sure they're going to put up for the task that you're going to do. Trying to put things away here. I'm going to put that pin right there since it took me 5 million years to find a flathead pin. So, but yes, I should probably put these needles away. That's one thing. If you have somebody who sews, one of the very bad habits that I developed was putting pins in my shirt. I wouldn't lose them, but if somebody tried to hug me, yeah, you might get kind of poked. So do be careful on where you set your pins and needles and things like that. And I am in a household with cats. Luckily they're being quiet right now. But with one of those situations, you don't want your little pet friends to end up getting into your sewing supplies, because if they do, if they eat some needles or pins, you're going to be having one nasty vet bill, because yeah, it's probably going to require surgery because crazy things happen. We're in that wonderful time of the year right now where it is the holiday season, so of course the kitty cats are trying to eat my Christmas tree. I have an artificial one just for that reason, because I don't want them getting sick on pine needles from a real tree, plus the watering and upkeep. So I bought a new tree. It's a nice little 6-foot one. I might turn this around and kind of get you to look at it. But I've had it now almost, well, 5 years short of 20 years. So I look at it as it's an investment, and I'm not going to be throwing away this tree until I'm probably 80 years old and moving into a nursing home or something like that. So, I mean, I'm going to have that pretty much for the entirety of my life. So things like that, I don't mind necessarily spending a little money on. And I didn't really buy an expensive one. I got the bargain basement one at Walmart, and it actually is holding up surprisingly well. Let's see. So we talked about all the cool things of tapes. And I showed you beeswax, but I have this is 5 pounds of beeswax. I am not going to get through this anytime soon. But besides clothing, with the fact that I make dolls, I found out that wax dolls really didn't come in until about the 1800s or so, where they tried to make the translucency of your skin kind of a thing. But beeswax I use on the doll's hair to kind of keep things smoothed down. And I have a couple different uses for it around the house, besides, you know, candles or other vintagey things that people would have done before 1900 with beeswax, because it was kind of the glue at the time, other than hide glue, so to speak. Sewing tools. You're like, okay. Clover is a sewing company, and they made a series of vintage sewing. It's a metal thimble. I am not very good about using thimbles, and I like this one that it's adjustable and it sits pretty well. I use either my ring finger on my right hand. I'm right-handed, but keep in mind that whatever dominant hand you have, whichever one you're using the needle in is the one you want to use your thimble on. So a lot of people will use it on this finger. For me, sometimes I'll use it on my ring finger too, because this is what I'm doing to push, because I'm holding it kind of like that. But it all depends on which finger you use to push. I use either or, so whichever one I'm using. And this one also has little divots in it. Some thimbles will have slots kind of put into them, or dots. In this case, this has tiny little dots in it. And it has this nice little lip too that has some dots in it, and it's really great for pushing your needle. Or if I can give you an example here. Okay, it's a big needle, but basically I'm holding it there, and then I am using this as my pushing finger. And you go right through like that. So thimbles, very helpful. Otherwise you get little indentations, or right now I have a tiny little callus that I filled up right here. It's kind of flat right there. And those eventually peel and they become very tender. So if you're doing a lot of sewing, you want a thimble to protect your fingers. A wonderful lady here on YouTube, Bernadette Banner, has a wonderful tutorial on making a leather thimble, which is, the metal are probably more period. However, leather was used. It's a way of being able to protect your fingers one way or the other. So I mean, there's a couple different alternatives out there. And I started out with a leather thimble until I found a thimble that I liked that was metal. So I mean, the best part is you're not really wrong either way, because I mean, you're still protecting your fingers, and you're also able to prolong the amount of sewing that you can do because you're using a protective item. It's always good. So now I had talked about hooks and eyes earlier, and I told you they come in various different sizes. If I can get a hold of this here. Here we go. Check out that puppy. It's big. It's really big. It's not just because I'm holding it close. Like, yeah, see? That's big. It's made of brass, actually. And I found a few of these. I have the hook. I don't have the eye. However, there's a couple different ways. You can either create a sewing loop in your sewing to have this hook into on the clothing, or I can buy some gauged brass and then make a little eye. I like the flat ones. I know some people really love the round hook and eyes, but I have to sew them down more flat so then everything hooks together just so. I have a whole tray full of hooks and only one little eye. Isn't that kind of crazy? So there's a couple different ones you run into. Oh, maybe there's a round one. For eyes. So you have the hooks. The hooks are always pretty much the same. Some of them will have a little bump in it that'll your hook will click in to your eye. It'll make a little noise. It's kind of neat. And it prevents it from backing itself out and then coming undone. But you have an eye that looks like this, which is rounded. I find that I have to sew not just the loops right here, but I also put stitches just above it right there to keep it flat, so when it hooks in, that isn't kind of rolling up. Because if it's under stress and it's rolling up, it'll look and lay kind of funny. That was a trial and error. Or you have the little flat ones like this. There's a loop on, there's a loop on either end, and I don't have to do extra with this. It lays flat, so when it's in there, the hook and eye stay flat for the most part. A pair of snips is always very important. These are more meant for embroidery, but when I'm sewing, all I have to do is clip ends of fabric. So for me, this works well. And the necklace-y kind of thing that you're seeing here is I created sort of a chatelaine. But it's a chatelaine that's meant to sit around my neck. And you'll see this in maybe some of my other pictures if you check out my Facebook page. But I'll just do it like this, and then everything that I need is right here. I can just kind of grab what I need. Of course, with my hair long, this is probably not the best thing to do. Oh, okay. It didn't get caught, surprisingly. Normally it would get caught. And I have some mother of pearl pieces here that are kind of nifty. I have this one down here. These are just beads that I found. So what I like to say is, if you're going to have sewing things, have fun with it. Make things that are useful. That's one of the things that always sort of bothered me about sort of the country primitive situation, is they tried to make things useful, but they were just sort of meant to sit around. It's decorative items to sit around is nice, but I'm not a huge clutter person. I don't have a lot of room for a lot of my things, so most of it is sitting in a manner that is sitting in a manner of totes right now down in the basement. But some of the other tools I have here are a thread cutter. There's this edge on it, so you have to put the thread into the grooves in order to cut it. There's also one that goes on your finger. This is full of like a sand or grit, and it's a needle sharpener. A ring-based pin keep. So I like that they're kind of mobile, but I can even put them on this little chatelaine-like item, and they're still useful because they're still within arm's reach. And of course my thimble. So I have little hooks here, and I just put that right there. Now, I don't always wear it, but it's one of those things that's nice to kind of have around. I have Jace sitting off to the side. He is my all-black cat. I have 2 all-black cats, and since I'm in here talking to you folks, of course, they're in here too. And I had forgotten, besides tapes, you know, bias tape and all the other wonderful forms of sewing tapes, I wanted to talk about trims too. So tapes and trims, very kind of festive if you think about it. So there's a couple different ways that trims can be used and created. This is a jacquard trim. So it's opposite on either side. An opposite pattern, so to speak. I'm trying to make room for Jace over here. I think he wants to eat the beeswax, so I'm gonna have to be careful. And he likes the paper texture. So this one could be used for belt strapping. I was gonna make this into a guitar strap because I have a few of those in the basement. Oh, I know. You just lay here and be good. Quit fussing and making noise. Bear with me. I'm gonna put the beeswax away because, you know, cats and curiosity and all this, he can't handle it. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay. One of the other ways of making another very strong kind of trim is what they call, let's see, there's tablet weaving. This is the other kind. I just can't remember the name of it. But I think you can kind of see it's got the sort of looped edges. This isn't tablet weaving though. This is the other kind of weaving that also creates a belt and other narrow like items. Besides this being a guitar strap, when I sew linen, that's kind of what the fuzzy things you might be seeing here are, or at least the light's catching it enough. When I sew or spin linen into thread, well, flax into linen thread, I use this to kind of hold the bunch of linen flax fibers, and then it's tied up to a distaff. This helps tie it to the distaff portion. But yeah, this is actually tablet woven, and it's done in such a manner that this would sort of be, it creates a V pattern, and that also, it's also very strong too. So tablet weaving's another way of making the narrow pieces. You could use it for trim, you could use it to tie something up. If you had narrow pieces like this, you could almost use it like cord and tie clothes together, or create closures for your clothing. Here's one that's fun. I think I'm gonna have to find a spot for one of these guys on my chatelaine. I may have to figure a little something out. And all, AWL, that's how it's spelled. This one's made of bone. It is hand carved. And it doesn't have a very sharp end on it. It's actually kind of flat, but the cool thing about that is you could easily take a little nail file and make it sharper if you wanted it sharper. What this tool helps with is creating eyelets, hand-done eyelets. you'd basically poke it through a piece of fabric, and you'd be going in between the threads, just like that. Now this is a knit piece, so this is really easy for it to poke through. But even if, let's say, you created a hole and you didn't want that hole, and then it's back together again. This goes in between the weave of the fabric, opens it up to however far down you push it, and then from there you can stitch around the opening that you made, and now you have an eyelet in your clothing. And with it being stitched all the way around, it'll stay open. You could put then a piece of cording or lacing through that to tie clothes together. Very, very popular. Hand-done eyelets, I mean, we're all the way through to Victorian times before metal eyelets were created. So, I mean, it's something that you'll see on a lot of extant pieces. I just don't know if I have any spot for this wonderful awl. I'll probably have to take a little bit of cord, tie it on here, and then put it on one of my hooks. But I actually have a couple of them. They make great gifts. I mean, the cool thing about this and some of the other vintagey sewing items that you have or can find is if you know someone who sews, they're really going to appreciate something like that if they don't already have it for themselves. I'm just gonna put this back in the bag. Don't want to lose it. One of the other items that comes in quite handy. I found the flat eye for one of those large hooks. I'll show you in a minute. A seam ripper. And if you know anybody who sews, a seam ripper is a thing. We all make mistakes, unfortunately, and then you realize that you didn't mean to do what you did, and now you have to take all your stitches out. A seam ripper is a great thing. It certainly helps one correct something that maybe got sewed together that was either done too soon. You can kind of name the situation. I'm certain that you could figure it out from there. You might even, on the internet, there's quite a few different kinds of sewing memes. They're out there, trust me. And one of the ones is like sewing in a sleeve upside down. I've done that. That's setting sleeves is not one of my favorites. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who feel the same way out there. Sorry, you're looking at the top of my head. Trying to get these big hooks and eyes into a different container. And I found a few other ones that were floating in my other sewing bin, so I can put them away properly. I hope. I have this little box full of hook and eyes, and nothing wants to sit right because, well, I'm filming, so of course it's not going to want to sit right because, yeah, that's just the way that nature wants it to be. Yep, just spilled all those hook and eyes. Woohoo! Okay. Let's try to kind of put these guys back in. These ones are kind of bigger too. There you go. You see that little bump on the inside of the hook? That's what I was talking about, that will hold the eye in place and keep it from undoing itself. A lot of the medieval hooks and eyes that people make, they're just straight and flat. But you've got your hook. You've got your eye, and they hold. Ta-da! But yeah, because it could easily fall out, of the opening. This is one of those straight ones that I enjoy very much instead of a loop. But you could create either or. I just noticed for my own use, the loops require more work in keeping them nice and flat and keeping it closed. Something like this you could use on a cloak or a coat or something like that, a capelet. This would work for something like that. Now, I'm not 100% sure on when safety pins were developed, but they are great. I love them. And I don't tend to use them very often in my sewing adventures just because I'm not sure when they're created, but I'm sure one of you guys can Google it and find out when. I just found about 6 flat eye pins, or flat topped pins, and I'm just kind of putting them in the top. Now, yeah, depending on the situation, I noticed that for clothing you run into a lot of the brass hook and eyes, or excuse me, brass safety pins, though you do run into steel ones, especially if they need to do a bit more. All right, Boo, you're so nice. He's sitting over here being Have. This is unusual. So, I'm still trying to remember the weave of this. I'd look it up on the phone, but I'm using that for filming right now. I want to say it starts with an N. I just can't remember. But anyway, there's a couple different kinds of weaving of narrow belt-like trims that one can use and create. And what I like is normally when you make them yourselves, you can put little tassels on the end and have a whole bunch of fun with it. It's not null binding. Null binding is kind of like weaving, so to speak. Null binding is null binding, which is more of a Nordic, Icelandic kind of ancient skill. They used it to make socks and hats and things like that, which is really nifty. I'm going to remember it when I stop filming. That's what's going to happen. Too many techniques, but a lot of nifty techniques. I really love the colors on this. This one's old, and I think it definitely does not feel like wool. If there is some wool content, it's slight. This probably has a bit of acrylic to it. Yeah, there might be some wool in there. And some more of my embroidery. I don't know if I had showed you the other one. That's what the one with the pins and the magnet is in there. And I keep the needles and the beeswax cake are in here. I bought these at, you know, a thrift shop, and you can even buy them online. They're called little Quaker boxes, or shaker, not Quaker, shaker boxes. And they're really quite nice, to be honest. I'm gonna put my tapes in here with my hooks and eyes, just bear with me. I'm not gonna be able to put the rolls in here, but I can put the little pieces. There we go. And one of the things that I've just kind of recently gotten for Tudor clothing purposes, they're hooks, but just hooks. There's no eyes with these guys. They're Tudor dress hooks made from bronze. And that's actually some of the reason that I bought the linen tape. And I got a hold of the ladies at the Tudor tailor, and they said that you don't need very much of this. And I'll sort of sew down the end, maybe narrow it, I'm not sure. But basically, You just sew that on, and then you have a length. You don't need much. It's just enough to go over the small of your back. Depends also on how hippie of a person you are. I have kind of a wider back end. These things do happen, especially when you work a sedentary job and your hobbies are sedentary too. You need to get out on more walks. But I only need a small bit of the linen tape, which has a little stretch to it, and these would hook in to a piece of fabric, and I know I have a piece of fabric out here that I can use. I have my cloak sitting right here next to me. Let me see. Find an edge. Okay. This is kind of the top of the hood, but it'll do the job. So you would just hook that in to the fabric, and the tension from the tape around the small of your back would hold the front of your skirts up. And because this is wool, it sort of heals itself. It doesn't matter if you stab through it. Linen, you'd have a little bit more of a problem with it doing the self-healing situation, but there is enough of a point on here. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, there we go. There's enough of a point on there that you shouldn't be slicing through the threads of the fabric. It should just sort of slide around them. Should, in theory. But I would use this mainly on my wool dresses if I needed to hike them up, but I didn't feel like hemming them. Hemming helps, it certainly does, but there are some times where I like to keep things a little bit longer, and this will have a much better use. He's trying to play with the other one. Don't eat my dress hooks. That's not nice. Too many toys for a kitty cat. But I'm quite happy with them, and I've been wanting to get a set. So I found these on Etsy. There's I believe her name is like Miss Davis, I think. I'll have to post the link below. But they're really nifty, and there's a couple different styles based on the time period that you're depicting. I'm trying to do Tudor, so they just have kind of like a little daisy like flower in there. 8-petaled little flower. And I also got this nice little metal bodkin. Bodkins are another item, yet again, that can go on the chatelaine. Now, some of them can be bigger and smaller. You're going to run into bodkins, especially in null binding. The bodkins are big. They're like that. But this guy is made of bronze, very similar to the hooks. And they come in handy too. That's why I was talking about larger needles and things like that. You can almost use them like a bodkin too, like an embroidery needle, because those have somewhat of a blunt end to them depending on how big of a gauge you get. Like crewel embroidery ones, I've noticed those have a nice blunt end to them. You can almost use them similarly to a bodkin. Bodkins can also be made of bone. I don't happen to have any with me right now, but I know, just like the amount of awls that I ordered, I have several bone bodkins running around somewhere. Yet again, something to put on the chatelaine to keep all the tools handy. I may have to, instead of putting everybody on this end, put some on my little loop right here. I'll have to figure out the arrangement. And I'm getting bitten by the cat. What are you doing? He wants to play with the things. And one of the other bits of tablet weaving kind of a situation, this is a straight web-like weave here. And it's made of, this feels like wool, to be honest. And I found this yet again at the vintage sewing lady. And so I have a wool cloak made out of an army blanket. I'm using this to make a nice red edge. I'm gonna go all the way around the edge and the bottom, and I have enough left over. I can maybe make a little striping or do it like this, where I have this around the edge. Not that I have to worry about any fraying from the wool. This is heavy enough. You don't really have to worry about that. But maybe just to create some interest where you have this pop of red against the rest of it. I haven't decided if I'm going to do a double stripe yet or not, but I have the rest of it pinned into place. Try to not knock things over here. But it's going to need to be stitched down on this side and on the inside. So I have some coordinating red thread. Now this is just polyester. I'm not doing anything super fancy here, but I wanted it to color match, so when it'll match and blend in and you won't notice it. That's one thing that I learned as I was sewing, is blending. You might only have some thread that's of a certain color, but if you do your best to buy color matching things and then do small stitches, it may take you longer, but what's nice about it is you really create something where you can barely see the stitches and it's almost sort of like it magically went together. And that's really what sewing is you're creating something from various different items with a couple different interesting tools, and can make some awesome stuff. What I love about the army blankets is they not only make great cloaks, but they also, you can just drape yourself and have your army blanket over your lap. And I am perfectly toasty right now. This is kind of nice. Oh, it still bothers me that I can't remember what that form of weaving is besides tablet weaving. Yep, that's gonna bother me. Oh well. Can't remember everything. But if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. This is a longer video than I normally post, but it's been a while, so I wanted to make sure to give you quite a bit of time. And with it being, the weekend before Christmas, I really do want to wish you a very Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and for those of you who don't necessarily celebrate, Happy Holidays. Well, I guess that's about it. As I said, if you have any questions, and if you're new to this channel, and I have other wonderful videos in regards to not just sewing, but also about weaving and other medieval crafts, think about subscribing. But as I said, have a wonderful rest of 2019, and good luck in 2020. Bye.